May 18, 1963. The Cannes Film Festival was in full swing, with the world's most prestigious filmmakers, actors, and critics gathered along the French Riviera for cinema's most important annual celebration. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, glamour, and the kind of artistic tension that only occurs when the world's greatest creative talents are brought together in one place. Alain Delon had arrived at the festival as one of Europe's most promising young actors, but he was still largely unknown to American audiences. His recent performance in Luchino Visconti's The Leopard was generating considerable buzz among critics, and many were predicting that this handsome 27-year-old Frenchman could become the next great international star. But Alain faced a challenge that many European actors encountered when trying to cross over into the American market: the assumption that his remarkable good looks were his primary asset, and that beneath the elegant exterior there might not be much substance. This stereotype would come to a head during what was supposed to be a routine international press conference held in the Grand Salon of the Hôtel Martinez, one of Cannes' most prestigious venues. The press conference had been organized to discuss the future of international cinema, with several of the festival's most prominent attendees invited to participate. Along with Alain, the panel included some of the most respected names in world cinema, including Italian director Federico Fellini, British actress Vanessa Redgrave, and the undisputed king of American method acting, Marlon Brando. At 39, Brando was at the height of his powers and influence. His revolutionary approach to acting had changed the entire landscape of American cinema, and his performances in films like A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and The Wild One had established him not just as a movie star, but as the definitive example of what serious artistic acting could achieve. Brando commanded enormous respect throughout the film industry, and his opinions on acting and actors carried tremendous weight. When Marlon Brando spoke about the craft of acting, people listened. The press conference began normally enough, with questions about various aspects of filmmaking and the international film market. Alain answered several questions about European cinema with intelligence and thoughtfulness, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of the artistic and commercial aspects of the business. But it was when a British journalist asked about the differences between American and European approaches to acting that the tension in the room began to rise. American acting, particularly method acting, requires a kind of psychological truth that goes beyond mere surface beauty, Brando responded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had revolutionized the craft. Too many actors, particularly those who rely on their looks, never develop the internal technique necessary for real dramatic work. The comment seemed general enough, but several people in the room glanced at Alain, wondering if Brando was making an indirect reference to the young European actor whose striking appearance had made him a favorite of fashion photographers and gossip columnists. The moment of truth came when another journalist asked Brando directly for his opinion on the new generation of European actors who were beginning to gain international attention. Brando paused, looked directly at Alain, and delivered a response that would be remembered for decades. Well, let's be honest. Many of these so-called European stars are really just pretty boy pretenders. They photograph beautifully, they look perfect in costumes, but when it comes to the real work of acting, accessing genuine emotion, creating authentic character, they simply don't have the tools. The room went silent. It was clear to everyone present that while Brando hadn't mentioned Alain by name, he was clearly referring to him. The insult was devastating not just because of its content, but because of its source. When the world's greatest living actor questions your legitimacy as a performer, it's not just a personal attack, it's a professional death sentence. Alain felt the weight of every eye in the room turning toward him. This was his moment of truth. He could deflect with humor, ignore the comment entirely, or respond defensively. Instead, he chose a path that no one in the room expected. "Monsieur Brando," Alain said, his voice calm and respectful, "I have enormous admiration for your work and your contributions to our craft. If you believe that I lack the internal technique necessary for real acting, I would be honored if you would give me the opportunity to demonstrate otherwise." Brando looked surprised. Most actors, when challenged by him, either backed down or became defensive. Alain was doing neither. "What exactly are you proposing?" Brando asked, clearly intrigued despite himself. "An improvisational scene," Alain replied. "Choose any situation, any emotional context, and let's explore it together. Let the journalists and critics here judge whether I am merely a pretty boy pretender or whether I can access the kind of truth you speak of." The audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. Alain was essentially challenging the master of method acting to a public demonstration of their respective skills. It was either brave or foolhardy, and no one in the room was quite sure which. Brando studied Alain for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to accept what amounted to a professional duel. The room remained silent, with dozens of the world's most important film critics and industry professionals waiting to see how this unprecedented confrontation would unfold. "Very well," Brando said finally. "Let's try something. You're a soldier who has just learned that his best friend has been killed in battle. You have to tell his wife the news." It was a brutal choice, a scenario requiring enormous emotional depth and the ability to access genuine grief and loss. Brando was essentially testing whether Alain could summon real emotion on command, one of the fundamental skills of method acting. Without hesitation, Alain stood up from his seat at the panel table and moved to the center of the room. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and began to speak to an imaginary woman standing before him. What happened next stunned everyone in the room. Alain's entire demeanor transformed. The polished, elegant young man who had been answering questions moments before disappeared, replaced by someone raw, broken, and struggling with unbearable news. His voice cracked as he spoke about the fictional friend's death. His hands trembled as he described the final moments, and tears began to flow down his face as he tried to console the imaginary widow. But it was more than just technical skill. Alain accessed something genuinely painful from his own experience, perhaps memories of loss from his troubled childhood, or the deaths of fellow soldiers during his military service. The emotion was so real, so raw, that several people in the audience found themselves crying along with him. For 3 minutes, Alain held the entire room in the palm of his hand. Hardened film critics who had seen thousands of performances found themselves completely absorbed in this improvised scene. The technical mastery was evident, but more importantly, the emotional truth that Brando prized above all else was undeniably present. When Alain finished, the room remained silent for several seconds. Then, slowly, Marlon Brando began to applaud. The rest of the room followed, and soon the entire gathering was giving Alain a standing ovation. But it was what Brando said next that truly shocked everyone present.
"I was wrong," Brando announced, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "I made an assumption based on appearances, and I was completely wrong. What I just witnessed was not pretty boy pretending, it was genuine artistry. Monsieur Delon, I apologize publicly for my earlier comment, and I would be honored to work with you someday." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Journalists began scribbling notes frantically, photographers started snapping pictures, and the buzz of excited conversation filled the room. In the span of 5 minutes, Alain had gone from being dismissed as a superficial pretty boy to being publicly endorsed by the world's most respected actor. But the impact extended far beyond just that moment.
Word of the confrontation and its resolution spread throughout the festival within hours. By evening, everyone at Cannes was talking about the young French actor who had stood up to Marlon Brando and earned his respect through pure talent. International distributors who had been hesitant to invest in Alain's career suddenly saw him in a new light. If Marlon Brando considered him a legitimate actor, then he was worth serious consideration for major projects. More importantly, the incident changed how Alain was perceived throughout the industry. The pretty boy stereotype that had followed him throughout his early career was effectively demolished in a single afternoon. From that moment forward, critics and casting directors would focus on his acting ability rather than just his appearance. The professional relationship between Alain and Brando continued long after Cannes. Brando made good on his promise to work with Alain, recommending him for several international projects and serving as an unofficial mentor as Alain navigated the complexities of building a global career. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was equally dramatic. Within hours of the press conference, agents and producers throughout the festival were seeking meetings with Alain. The endorsement from Marlon Brando had transformed him from a promising European actor into a must-have international talent almost overnight. Studio executives who had previously seen Alain as merely a handsome face suitable for romantic comedies suddenly began considering him for serious dramatic roles. The incident had demonstrated not just his acting ability, but his intelligence, courage, and grace under pressure, qualities that Hollywood valued enormously. The story spread far beyond Cannes. International journalists from around the world wrote about the confrontation, and the story was picked up by major newspapers and magazines. Time magazine ran a feature article titled "The Pretty Boy Who Wasn't," which detailed the incident and its implications for European actors trying to break into the American market. The impact on Alain's career was immediate and profound. Offers began pouring in from international producers who wanted to work with the actor who had impressed Marlon Brando. More importantly, these were offers for substantial, challenging roles rather than the lightweight romantic parts he had previously been offered. One of the most significant outcomes was Alain's subsequent casting in several major American productions. Directors who had been hesitant to trust important roles to an untested European actor were now eager to work with someone who had earned Brando's public endorsement. The incident also changed how acting coaches and drama schools taught their students about professional behavior. The incident became a standard example of how to handle criticism constructively, how to turn challenges into opportunities, and how to demonstrate professionalism under pressure.
Years later, Brando would reflect on that afternoon at Cannes as one of his most important lessons about the dangers of making assumptions about other actors. "I learned that day that real talent can exist in any package," he said in a 1975 interview with Playboy magazine. "Alain taught me not to judge a book by its cover or an actor by his headshots. It was humbling to realize that my prejudices had almost caused me to dismiss someone of genuine talent." Brando also admitted that the incident had made him more careful about public statements regarding other actors. "I realized that my words carried weight that I hadn't fully appreciated," he explained. "When you're in a position of influence, you have a responsibility to be thoughtful about how you use that influence." For Alain, the confrontation became a defining moment that shaped not just his career, but his approach to the craft of acting. It gave him the confidence to take on more challenging roles and the credibility to be taken seriously by directors and critics who might have otherwise dismissed him as just another pretty face. The incident also strengthened Alain's belief in the importance of continuous learning and improvement as an actor. He began studying method acting techniques more seriously, working with coaches and taking classes to deepen his understanding of the psychological approaches that Brando had mastered. More significantly, the confrontation taught Alain about the power of authentic emotion in performance.
The improvised scene he had performed drew on real experiences and genuine feelings, and the response from the audience had shown him how powerful such authenticity could be. The ripple effects of that afternoon extended throughout the international film community. Other European actors who had been struggling with similar stereotypes found themselves being taken more seriously by American producers and directors. The incident had demonstrated that talent could come from anywhere and in any form. Film critics also began to examine their own assumptions about actors and performances. Many admitted that they had been guilty of the same kind of superficial judgment that Brando had initially made about Alain. The incident sparked broader discussions about how the industry evaluated and categorized performers.
The story of that day at Cannes became legendary in film circles, often cited as an example of how true talent will always rise to the surface when given the opportunity to shine. It also demonstrated the importance of having the courage to stand up for oneself, even when faced with criticism from the most powerful people in your industry. Film schools today use the incident as a case study in professional courage and artistic integrity. Students learn not just about the technical aspects of improvisation and method acting, but about the importance of believing in your own abilities even when others doubt them. The journalists and critics who witnessed the confrontation would remember it for the rest of their careers as one of the most dramatic and unexpected moments they had ever experienced at a film festival. Many wrote about it in their memoirs, describing how they had watched a young actor transform himself from target to hero in the space of a few minutes. Perhaps most importantly, the incident highlighted the danger of stereotyping in the entertainment industry. Brando's initial dismissal of Alain based on his appearance reflected a broader tendency to categorize actors by their looks rather than their abilities. The dramatic reversal served as a powerful reminder that real talent comes in many forms. Today, the story of Alain Delon's confrontation with Marlon Brando at the 1963 Cannes Film Festival is remembered as one of the great moments of artistic vindication in cinema history. It proved that when talent meets opportunity and courage, even the most established hierarchies can be challenged and changed. The young man who walked into that press conference as a pretty face walked out as a respected artist, forever changed by a moment of professional trial by fire that he had passed with flying colors. If this incredible story of courage, talent, and artistic vindication inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that true ability will always shine through when given the chance. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who initially doubted your abilities? Because sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest triumphs.